There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn Breathes Books. Welcome back to my channel and a full review of a debut Irish novel that I recently read and loved with all my heart. It's called The Language of Remembering by Patrick Holloway. Patrick Holloway was my mystery guest. We had a lively chat some months back, and I'll put a link to that chat in the show notes. And I hadn't read the book at that point, but sure wanted to. And now I have, and oh my God, I have much to tell you without spoiling a thing. It's a character-driven novel, so there isn't a whole lot to spoil, but I'm not gonna spoil anything. So there are two timelines, and there are two main characters. O'Sheen is a maybe 30-something Irish guy who has been in Brazil for years, has a Brazilian wife and two daughters, moves back to Ireland, and I believe it's set in County Cork in the present day, in the last few years. And one of the reasons he has come back with his family is that his mother, Bridget, has early onset Alzheimer's, and while she's still living at home with a live-in caregiver, her memory is deteriorating. So he wants to come home for that main reason. The other timeline is 1977, and I can pinpoint it because there's quite a bit of fuss, anti-monarchist fuss in Ireland at the time about the Silver Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth, and I'm such a geek that I happen to know that was 1977. And we see Bridget as a young girl, I think she's about 17, just finishing high school, and she gets pregnant by her lovely boyfriend. And in Catholic Ireland in 1977, that's a problematic situation anywhere, but just amp it up by 200% when you're putting it in that place at that time. It was so rich with character. Just to be clear, who she's pregnant with is the O'Sheen of the present timeline. Both characters are so lovingly drawn with such nuance that you just get lost in this story. It's just such a wonderful character-driven novel. I read it out loud to somebody, to my cousin Mary Jean. That's what I do with her. Read books to her on Facebook Messenger daily. And there were some scenes that I had to take a little pause because they were so poignant. So it's a very emotionally moving story. And there is so much intellectual, linguistic stuff going on that added a whole other layer of richness and ways to engage with this incredible story. Bridget's first language is Irish, and her relationship with her parents, she speaks only Irish to her dad and mostly English to her mother, although her mother is Irish as well. And in the present of the story, she is losing English and speaking more and more in Irish, and her son, O'Sheen, doesn't speak it hardly at all. And so he starts taking classes to learn it. And so all of that is as elemental to this incredible story as the bit of plot that we do get. And the other thing is that both Bridget and her mother, Kathleen, who is still alive in the present of the story, she must be in her 80s, late 80s or 90s, I'm not sure, but she punches above her weight as a minor character. She's really, you could almost argue there's three major characters because Kathleen is just larger than life. And she comes from a long line, I'm going to read you a passage a little bit about that, of word nerds, vocabularians. She loves language, and she always uses a $64 word when a two-syllable word would do. And it's so lovely, and her daughter Bridget has inherited that, and James to a certain extent too. So there's all this language. Look at the cover image. Language ricocheting through these characters' lives, and I just love that so much. And without giving any spoilers at all, O'Sheen experiences a trauma when he's a small boy, and he suffers temporary language loss as a result of that trauma. And he eventually gets his English back, but I think that's also what has caused him such trouble with his Irish. And so in the present, he's trying to learn Irish, but there's some kind of a block related to this trauma, and that is all sumptuously, very movingly explored. I don't think there's much more to say about this novel. I just loved it. I will read anything Patrick Holloway writes, and now I'm going to read you a short section about the parents. And I think I can pronounce all these Irish names. In this scene, it's just after Bridget, as a 17-year-old, I think she was 17, has found out she's pregnant, and her parents, and especially her dad, is not dealing with it very well at all. Her da, Tommy, was a taciturn man, but when he spoke, people straightened to listen. And he only spoke Irish at home, and she only ever answered in Irish. With her mother, Kathleen, it was different. Kathleen only sang lullabies in Irish, and Bridget never really knew if her mother knew the meaning of the words or not. When Tommy spoke, his words always said more than what they were saying, at least to Bridget. The way they rolled off his tongue when he was angry, like they had weight. She could hear them thud to the ground. Or no weight at all when he'd be after a pint, the way they'd float out of him, and she'd look up to see if they were trapped there among the wooden beams that triangled into the apex of the ceiling. The water was boiling, bubbles hissing over the pot, so she grabbed the handle and moved it on to the other hob. She took 2 mugs down from the wooden cupboard. It was once painted a kind of olive green, but now had peeled and faded into the color of the grass where her dogs pissed. Her father had chosen the paint down at Danny's hardware store, the exact hue of it her mother had called meretricious, and her father said, "Go on away with your metaricious." Her mother had laughed and left him to his painting, and he turned and looked down at Bridget and shrugged his shoulders before fighting a little with the opening of the lid. Kathleen read vivaciously. Bridget's grandfather, whom she had never met, had taught Kathleen to read and told her she should go to college, even though no girl from Minane Bridge had ever gone to college. He used to buy her books upon books, which she left all over the house, so there was nowhere she could not read. He told her that she was destined for illustriousness, and later that night she checked her dictionary to see what it meant and smiled into her pillow. Bridget put the round tea into the straining spoon and splashed the water in, took the dewy glass bottle of milk from the fridge and smelled it before pouring a little in each mug. She felt a little weak, queasy down below. Was it taking something from her already, draining her of a future? She cut a slice of the loaf that was hardening at the crust and spread some butter and the blackberry jam and ate it without thinking about the fact that she was eating. She strained the tea, squeezing at the handles of the spoon until the milky tint turned earthy. She always marveled at how it leaked a new color, how it became something different in the time it took to filter the loose-leaf tea. She heard her dad rise above, the wooden floorboards creaking. She ran to the back door, opened it, and retched right there on the doorstep. The dogs tilted their heads and shook their lazy bodies to rise up, then stretched their front legs and scurried over to see what was at her feet. You didn't really need to listen to anything I said before I read this to you, because now you're absolutely going to go rush out and fall into this gorgeous novel. I was provided an e-copy of this by the publisher, Epoch Press, in exchange for an honest review, and this is a very honest review, so I can't not say what I didn't like, and goodness, it was a little bit of a struggle to think of anything in terms of flaws, but I do have 2. And one, it struck me whenever this happened, but it's such a minor thing, and Mary Jean disagreed with me on this point. But I found it jarring when the conversation, and this was always in the present day story with Oshin and his family, or whoever he was talking to in that part of the timeline, that occasionally there would just be the most banal conversation. Hi, how are you? Or how was your day? And compared to what I just read you, the register, the intensity of language just disappeared for a quarter of a page, maybe 6 or 7 times throughout a 220-page novel. I mean, we're talking about a very small thing here, but it did. I just thought that all should have been gone or whatever. And that's very subjective. And the other thing is, in the present day timeline, when his mother Bridget is starting to lose her English and only speaking in Irish, as I mentioned, he takes Irish classes, but we don't get a whole bunch of detail about that. Lots about his psychological block about Irish. That's really richly detailed, but I would have been interested to hear more about what did he learn this or that day and what kind of memories did it bring up, and I could have read several pages more about that because it sounded so fascinating. But those are extremely minor, but fair and honest review, right? If you'd like slow-moving, character-driven novels, if you're into Irish literature, and if you're not, what the hell are you doing watching my channel, and books that are vibrating with language and intellect and open-heartedness, you must rush out and get your hands on The Language of Remembering by Patrick Holloway. I absolutely loved it.